Did you hear that NASA astronauts returned to Earth after being stuck in space for over 9 months? That's what we'll review in this Learn English with the News lesson. Welcome back to JForrest English. Of course, I'm Jennifer. Now let's get started. Our headline: astronauts return to Earth after being stuck in space for 9 months. So notice here, you return to a location. In this case, the location being Earth. Remember, you need that preposition to and then your location, in this case, Earth. So if you're on vacation, your friend might text you and say, "When do you return? When do you return?" Now, in this case, return means home. With the location home, you don't use a preposition. So it's just return home. It's also very common to use get instead of return. It sounds more natural to say get home. So when do you return? Or you could say, when do you get back? Back being because if you are in the city you live in and then you leave, so back represents that return. So when do you get back? That would be on vacation. Now, in an everyday context, someone could say, when did you get home? So if you were just at work, at the movies, at the store, at a party, when did you get home? I got home around 9 p.m. Again, you can say, when did you return home? But I personally would not say that. It sounds a little too unnatural for me as a native speaker. I would say get home. So of course your verb is get. Here it would be got, no preposition. But with return, you return to a location other than home. Now notice we have this preposition after, so we need your verb in ing form because after is a preposition. After being stuck in space. So here the verb represents to be. So you know with this, you need to be stuck. And then you can use in a location. If you're stuck in a location, it means that you're unable to move. You're unable to return. You're unable to go home, for example. So you can say, I was stuck in traffic for hours. Of course, our verb is to be, so you conjugate that. In this case, the past simple. Stuck is always in the third form. It does not change. I was stuck in traffic. Do not add a prep or an article. Do not say in the traffic. In a general sense is just traffic. I was stuck in traffic for hours, and there's no S either. So just in traffic, and then 4 hours is an unspecified amount of time, but it sounds like a long time. Now in that case, stuck means unable to move. We also use this to mean to be unable to progress, to make progress. Maybe you could say, I felt stuck. You can also use the verb to feel if it's more of a unable to progress with your professional or personal development or with a specific skill. I felt stuck. I was stuck with my English. You can just keep it general and say with my English, or you might add on with my English level. So if you felt stuck, if you were stuck, it means you were not making the progress that you wanted to. I felt stuck with my English level until I found Jennifer's channel. So hopefully you're thinking that right now. So this sounds like you were stuck, you found my channel, but now you're making progress because these lessons are helping you learn how to use English in the real world. So if that describes you, put that's me, put that's me in the comments. And I certainly hope these lessons are helping you progress, helping you get unstuck with your English. And don't worry about taking notes because I summarize everything in a free lesson PDF. You can find the link in the description. Let's continue. NASA astronauts Suni Williams and Butch Wilmore have finally arrived back on Earth. So notice here, they used to arrive back on Earth. If you used return, you would just say returned. I would say to Earth. You could also say arrived back to
Earth. They're using on because on is a preposition you use when you're in space. And then that's the preposition to be in space, to be on a planet. So that's why they used on Earth. But you could also say to, because we use to for location, for movement. Now remember, if you use return, you don't need to say back because that's what return means. So it's already implied. But you could also say have finally got back to Earth. This would be a little casual in this situation. So have finally returned to Earth after spending. So again, this is our preposition. So this is why you have your verb in ing. After spending an unplanned 9 months in space. So this is important because if it were unplanned, then it means that this was an unexpected trip. They were not expecting, they were not planning to spend this time in space. And remember I said in is the preposition you use with space. So I'm in space, I'm on Mars, I'm on Earth. So on a planet in space. The pair, so pair represents two, and two that complement each other. So here we have two people, and they're a pair because their skill sets complement each other. That's why you say a pair of mittens, because there are two, and you have your left hand and your right hand, so they complement each other. Or a pair of shoes, a pair of boots. So a pair, in this case the, because it's a specific pair, always two. Do you know the word for three? So pair is the word for two. Do you know what the word is for three? Say it out loud. Write it in the comments. It's a trio, a trio, a trio. I actually don't know what the word would be for four. So if you know, you can teach me something and share it in the comments. So the pair were only supposed to spend about 1 week in space. Wow. And then they spent 9 months. Okay, so notice here, the pair were, this is interesting because this is grammatically incorrect because the pair, yes, it's two people, but this would be a collective noun. So it should be the pair was. Now, it's possible that when the person originally wrote this article, they wrote they were, but then they decided to change they to something more interesting, the pair, and then they forgot to change the verb. So that is possible. But this is a collective. The pair was, because there's one pair. Yes, that pair represents two people, but it's one pair. So I just corrected that here. The pair was, or they were, only supposed to. Notice my pronunciation here, supposed to. So you do not hear this ed at all. It ends on an S sound, and then the next sound you hear is this T. Supposed to, supposed to, supposed to. So practice that pronunciation. And this sentence structure is to be supposed to, and then do something. So that's why we have this base verb here. But this verb to be is with the expression to be supposed to. Now, you conjugate your verb according to the subject and the time reference. So that's why it's in the past simple. And this structure is used to say there was an expectation, obligation, or plan in the past, but it does not mean that you did it. So if you say, I was supposed to study last night, because your verb to be, if it were they, then you would change it. They were supposed to study last night. It does not mean they studied. It just means that the expectation, obligation, or plan existed in the past.
Are you enjoying this lesson? If you are, then I want to tell you about the Finally Fluent Academy. This is my premium training program where we study native English speakers from TV, movies, YouTube, and the news so you can improve your listening skills of fast English, expand your vocabulary with natural expressions, and learn advanced grammar easily. Plus, you'll have me as your personal coach. You can look in the description for the link to learn more, or you can go to my website and click on Finally Fluent Academy. Now let's continue with our lesson.
However, unexpected issues extended their mission by several months and delayed their return. So remember, you could say return home, or you could say their return to Earth. So return home or return to Earth. Now here, instead of delayed, you could also say postponed, or you can use the phrasal verb pushed back. And all three of these mean you have a scheduled return time, let's say January 1st, and then it will be later than the scheduled time. It could be January 2nd, it could only be one day later, or it could be February 1st, a month later, 6 months, a year. It does not matter how long. Pushback is very common in the business world, especially with meetings, calls, appointments. We push back the meeting to Tuesday. So maybe the meeting was originally on Monday. It was supposed to be on Monday, but we pushed it back to Tuesday. I included that additional information. So the meeting, it was our verb to be conjugated in the past, supposed to. Remember that pronunciation. The meeting was supposed to be on Monday, but we pushed it back. Notice originally I had we pushed back the meeting, but a native speaker would not repeat the noun again. It sounds unnatural. So we would change the noun to it because it's known. Singular noun to it. We pushed it back. Now to push back is a separable phrasal verb. So when you have the pronoun it must come between the verb and the preposition. But we pushed it back to Tuesday. This would be a very natural thing to say in the business world. And here, the verb extend simply means to make longer, but it can be used in a positive context. We extended our vacation in Rome because we loved it so much. We were supposed to stay for 1 week, but we stayed for 2. We extended our stay. Let's continue. They were forced to remain. So now they represents the two people. Now, if it were the pair, it would be the pair was forced. So here this is correct. They were forced to remain in orbit around Earth when the vehicle they arrived in. So this is the name of the vehicle. Now notice this information is between dashes. It could also come between commas, and it means you can remove this entire part from the sentence and the sentence will still be grammatically correct. So this is often done to provide additional information if it is not obvious. So it's not obvious to me or the average person what this is. So it's useful that they specify it's the vehicle they arrived in. Boeing Starliner capsule developed thruster problems and helium leaks. And notice that this part is written in the passive form. So to be forced to. Now, you could focus on the subject doing the action and write it in the active form. And the subject doing the action in this case would be the thruster problems and helium leaks. So you could say thruster problems and helium leaks forced the astronauts to remain in orbit. And then that would be the active form. But you can see why we want to focus more on the astronauts receiving the action rather than what was doing the action. And to be honest, I don't know what a thruster problem is. So sometimes there are vocabulary, words, phrases that native speakers don't know because this isn't my area of expertise dealing with these mechanical issues. So if you know what this is, feel free to share it with me and the other students who don't know as well. So I wrote out the active sentence that you can review, compare it to the passive sentence as well. And notice here, there's always different ways of saying something. So you could say forced the astronauts, forced them, because we know them represents the astronauts, or forced the pair. And in this case, there's no conjugation difference in the next part, so I don't need to change anything if I use a plural or a singular. Let's continue. They spent, so here's the they, the pair, the astronauts. And again, because this is the past simple and past simple does not change according to the subject, with a few exceptions, like the verb to be in the past simple. This verb in the past simple, spend, does not change according to the subject. So I could use the pair and there would be no difference here. They, the pair, spent 286 days in space. So again, that preposition in space, one of the longest periods of time. So notice we have our superlative with the EST, and then you also need the is required. One of the longest periods of time on board the International Space Station. Let's continue. Dressed in re-entry suits, boots, and helmets. Okay, so notice here, this ED, it functions as an adjective. It's the participle form. And this part is used to provide additional information. So it's just describing it. It's helping you as the reader create a mental image of the astronauts in your mind. But all of this is not required grammatically, but it may be required for you to communicate whatever you want. So you could just say the astronauts were seen earlier on NASA's live footage, but this just describes them at that point in time. Often this style of sentence is done to provide the reason why. So let's look at this example. Grammatically, I could simply say she called her mom. That's a pretty basic sentence. You have no idea why. Is this positive, negative? What's the reason? Although it is grammatically correct as an A1, A2 sentence. Adding this makes it more of a C1, C2 sentence. Shocked by the news. So this is your ED form, which functions as the adjective. Shocked by the news, she called her mom. So this, although grammatically isn't required, it is required to communicate the reason why and to help you as the reader or listener understand the meaning of this. So said in a more B1, B2 way, you could say she called her mom because she was shocked. So to make this more C1, C2, you can just change the order. Shocked by the news, she called her mom. Another example, tired after a long day, she ordered Uber Eats. Again, she ordered Uber Eats because she was tired. So again, although sometimes in this case, it simply provides additional information, other times it really helps you explain the reason why. So let's read this again. Dressed in re-entry suits, boots, and helmets, the astronauts were seen earlier on NASA's live footage laughing. So they were seen laughing. Where were they seen? So, or when? So when? Earlier today, and where? On NASA's live footage. So they have a live stream and people were watching them. And what were they doing? They were laughing, hugging, and posing for photos. So posing is, so you pose and then someone takes your photo. So that would be posing for photos with their colleagues. Notice the pronunciation here, colleagues. Colleagues from the station shortly before they were shut into the capsule for 2 hours of final pressure, communications, and seal test. So they were they were locked into the capsule. So they were in the capsule and they were not able to leave for this period of time because they were doing these final tests before they can return to Earth, return home. let's continue. The capsule was lifted onto a recovery vessel about 30 minutes after the splashdown. So here, the splashdown, this represents when the capsule entered Earth and it went into the water. So this capsule went into the water and it created a splash. So that's where splash down. On a plane, you're familiar with touchdown, meaning the landing of the plane. And of course, a plane lands on Earth, on a solid surface. Although planes can land on water, many planes do, but this vessel entered the water. So a plane would land on the surface of the water, but this vessel went under the water and it created a splash. But that's what it was meant to do. That's how the capsule was designed. So here, the splashdown, this is a noun. And in the context of a plane, you would say touchdown, and that would be the noun as well. Now, after, this is a preposition, you can use a verb, but the verb would be in the ing form because after is a preposition. So you could say about 30 minutes, so about means approximately, about 30 minutes after splashing down, because this is a phrasal verb, to splash down. So you need the gerund form of the verb, and then you just have the preposition down. Same thing with touchdown, to touch down, but after touching down. Now, to land is a regular verb, not a phrasal verb. So you would say after landing. And these are the verb forms, and then this is the noun form. So the capsule splashed into the water, that's the splashdown, and then the capsule comes up, it's floating on water, and then they transferred it to a recovery vessel. I don't know what this is. Maybe it was a boat that was there to take the capsule safely to shore, but I'm not sure what the recovery vessel is. Okay, Williams returned home. Oh, we have our return home here. Returned home, remember, no to, just returned home. Williams returned home as the American astronaut with the second longest combined time in space. 608 days over 3 visits to the space station, the first in 2006. Okay, so the combined time, this would be not the opposite, but you have consecutive time. So that is days in a row, days, months, weeks in a row. But then combined, you take one period of time and then another period of time, another period of time, and you add those together. So it's different from consecutive time. You could say, I worked 10 hours today. Maybe you worked 3 hours in the morning, you went for a nice walk, you came back, worked another 3 hours, you had a nice lunch, took a nap, and then worked again. That could just be, I worked 10 hours today. If you said, I worked 10 consecutive hours today, that means you didn't take any breaks. So you started working at 8 o'clock a.m. and you did not stop working until 10 hours later. Maybe you got a glass of water or went to the bathroom, but otherwise you were working. I worked 10 consecutive hours today. Now in this sentence, consecutive is an adjective which matches this sentence structure where combined is also an adjective. You can also use the adverb form, which is consecutively. Consecutively. So this is the adverb form. So I worked 10 hours. How did you work those 10 hours? Consecutively. So either one is very common. So practice that pronunciation because it's a little bit of a longer word. I'll say both just one more time. Consecutively. Okay, let's continue. The future of Boeing's Starliner capsule, remember this is the name of the vessel, developed as part of NASA's Commercial Crew Program, remains uncertain. Okay, so again, remember this part of the sentence is additional information. It tells you more about Boeing's Starliner capsule because the average person, including me, reading this article has no idea what Boeing's Starliner capsule is. So they're giving us more information naturally as they tell you the story. So you could say the future of Boeing's Starliner capsule remains uncertain because all of this is additional. It can be removed and the sentence must be grammatically correct without it. Aviation Week. So I guess this is the name of a magazine or newspaper or organization. Aviation Week reported. So this would function as it. The company reported that Starliner, the name of the vessel, that Starliner was unlikely to fly again in 2025. So unlikely means there is a low probability, but it's not impossible. So it still is possible that Starliner will fly again, but maybe there's a 20 to 30% chance, 10 to 20% chance. There's less of a chance of it happening than there is of a chance of it not happening. Notice the sentence structure here: to be unlikely to do something, and someone or something, in this case Starliner, to be unlikely. So I could say I'm unlikely to meet the deadline. This means that there's an 80% chance that I won't meet the deadline. You could say more casually, I'm unlikely to go to the party. I'm unlikely to make dinner tonight. It can be very casual as well. Now, it's also very common to use the structure that the situation, so it is unlikely, and then that, and then a clause. A clause is a subject, a verb, and an object. So you can think of it as a complete sentence. Now, this is in the future simple because I'm making a prediction about the future. It's unlikely that I'll meet the deadline. Now, this word, that, is optional. So you can say it's unlikely I'll meet the deadline. It's unlikely that I'll meet the deadline. So this might be an easier sentence structure to remember, but this one is also very common. So you can start with this one, but I also recommend that you practice this one. And again, there's an 80% chance that you won't do the action, but that still means there's a 20% chance that you will. Okay, but the company, let me start again. Aviation Week reported that Starliner was unlikely to fly again in 2025, but that the company retained confidence. So retained confidence, it means that it kept its confidence that it had. So it remained confident to be confident. So confidence is a noun, but to be confident is an adjective. I think it would be more common to say remained confident in its product. But retained confidence is absolutely grammatically correct. But that the company retained confidence in its product, the product being Starliner, and was working towards earning a new flight readiness certification. So this is a piece of paper that says, yes, the Starliner is ready to fly in space. Now notice this pronunciation, certification. Certification. Where's the syllable stress? Certification. Cation. So this is the syllable stress. And I'm sharing this because the word certificate has a different syllable stress. So this is the phonetic spelling. This dash right here tells you where the syllable stress is. So this syllable, which is highlighted here, is the syllable stress. Certification. But in this case, it's this syllable that has the syllable stress. Certificate, which is right here. The TIF is what you hear. Certificate, certificate, certification. But notice how quickly I go through this because it's not the stress syllable. Certification, certificate. So you can practice both of those in one sentence to hear the syllable stress. So I'll give you one sentence that uses both and you can practice that pronunciation. So a certificate is more of the actual piece of paper, and then certification is more of the credential. So it's what that piece of paper represents. So you can say, although I lost the certificate, I can still provide proof of my certification. So I don't have the piece of paper, the certificate, but I can give you proof that I have the qualifications, my certification. So I explained the meaning of it. Now I'll just say it again so you can listen to the pronunciation and specifically that syllable stress difference. Although I lost the certificate, I can still provide proof of my certification. So you can practice that. And that's the end of the article. So what I'll do now is I'll read the article from start to finish and you can focus on my pronunciation. Astronauts return to Earth after being stuck in space for 9 months. NASA astronauts Suni Williams and Butch Wilmore have finally arrived back on Earth after spending an unplanned 9 months in space. The pair were only supposed to spend about 1 week in space. However, unexpected issues extended their mission by several months and delayed their return. They were forced to remain in orbit around Earth when the vehicle they arrived in, Boeing Starliner capsule, developed thruster problems and helium leaks. They spent 286 days in space, one of the longest periods of time on board the International Space Station. Dressed in re-entry suits, boots, and helmets, the astronauts were seen earlier on NASA's live footage, laughing, hugging, and posing for photos with their colleagues from the station shortly before they were shut into the capsule for 2 hours of final pressure, communications, and sealed tests. The capsule was lifted onto a recovery vessel about 30 minutes after the splashdown. Williams returned home as the American astronaut with the second longest combined time in space, 608 days over 3 visits to the space station, the first in 2006. The future of Boeing's Starliner capsule, developed as part of NASA's Commercial Crew Program, remains uncertain. Aviation Week reported that Starliner was unlikely to fly again in 2025, but that the company retained confidence in its product and was working towards earning a new flight readiness certification.
Do you want me to make another lesson where we review the news together? If you do, put yes, 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 put yes, yes, yes in the comments below. And of course, make sure you like this lesson, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you're notified every time I post a new lesson. And you can get this free speaking guide where I share 6 tips on how to speak English fluently and confidently. You can click here to download it or look for the link in the description. And here's another lesson I know you'll love. Watch it now.